had started today by saying that this is our inaugural session. Therefore, I think there's a tradition in our country that any good occasion or auspicious occasion is incomplete without the quintessential lamp lighting, and our dignitaries are present here. Therefore, in order to conduct the same, I'm going to invite them on stage. Let me begin by welcoming on stage Chairman Mumbai First, Mr. Narinder Nayar. European Union Ambassador to India, Mr. Astuto. I'm going to once again welcome back on stage Senior Partner McKinsey India, Mr. Rajat Gupta. Consul-General, Consulate-General of Netherlands, Mr. Bart the Jong. Representing Municipal Commissioner MCGM, Mr. Iqbal Singh Chahal is Mr. Sanjeev Kumar, Additional Municipal Commissioner, City MCGM. Vice President, Private Sector and PPP, Asian Development Bank, Mr. Ashok Lavasa. Metropolitan Commissioner, MMRDA, Mr. SVR Srinivas. Principal Secretary, Environment, Government of Maharashtra, Ms. Manisha Mhaiskar. Chief Secretary, Government of Maharashtra, Mr. Kumar Srivastav. Vice Chairman, Mumbai First, Mr. Roger Pereira. And ladies and gentlemen, our guest of honor who has graced this occasion, Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Tourism Protocol, Government of Maharashtra, Mr. Aditya Thackeray. Can we have the lamp on stage, please? Sir, ma'am.
I'll request Mr. Aadl Bagai please to come on stage from UNEP India. Thank you.
Sir, ma'am, may I please request you all to kindly do the honors? Lamp lighting is an ancient ceremony that has been conducted before every auspicious good occasion in our country. I think this is a tradition which dates back centuries. Lighting of the lamp, the flame of light is symbolic of the light of knowledge which dispels the darkness of ignorance from our life. Thank you very much. I'm going to request you all to kindly take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin, on the table. Can we have an additional chair on stage, please? So, ladies and gentlemen, as we commence, a formal welcome is in order. I request Chairman Mumbai First, Mr. Narinder Nayar, to kindly join me at the dais.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minister, Ambassador, Commissioner, Principal Secretary Environment, other members of the top table, and members of the Consular Corps, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Mumbai First and on my behalf, a very warm welcome to all of you this morning to this conference on a subject so very important for the future of our city. Mr. Minister, may I say what a great pleasure and indeed an honor it is to welcome you here this morning, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation to be with us today. A very warm welcome to the Ambassador, Astuto, who has come especially from Delhi to be with us, and thank you, Ambassador, for the support we continue to get from you personally and from the European Union. A number of programs have been all carried through the European-India partnership under the Mumbai EU partnership, and thank you very much for all that support. Mr. Minister, I followed with great interest the recent Glasgow COP26 and the excellent intervention by you in Glasgow. It is indeed a matter of great pride that under your leadership, Maharashtra was acknowledged and awarded Regional Leadership Award from Under 2 Coalition for Climate Action. Our heartiest congratulations to you, Mr. Minister, on this recognition, which was conferred on you by the Mayor of Glasgow. Please, warm. Mr. Minister, I would also like to take this opportunity to compliment you on your leadership in the preparation of the Mumbai Climate Action Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, during the Silver Jubilee year of Mumbai First, we identified climate action as our core theme. Climate change continues to be our focus, and I followed with great interest the recent Glasgow COP26 conference. The conference was supposed to put the world on the 1.5 degree pathway, but has it succeeded? Only time will tell. I do believe, however, the conference delivered some very important successes, but fell short of expectations. The important thing, in my view, is that leaders from around the world gathered in Glasgow talk about the challenges we face from climate change and urge that something must be done now and today and not tomorrow. The Stern Committee report of 2005 had warned us that coastal cities like Mumbai are vulnerable to seawater temperature rises. More recently, the newly released Inter-Government Panel on Climate Change Sixth Assessment Report has once again reminded us the seawater temperatures will continue to rise in the 21st century, and coastal cities like Mumbai, Shanghai, Bangkok, Vietnam, Jakarta, Colombo, amongst others, will be most vulnerable and exposed to coastal flooding, risking the lives of millions of people and affecting assets worth trillions and trillions of dollars. We are very concerned about our city, Mr. Minister. The Stern Committee report of 2005 should have been a wake-up call for all of us, but the challenges Mumbai continued to face, falling heavy and prolonged rainfall and delayed winter, all underlines the fact that Mumbai has not received the attention it deserves. Mr. Minister, we are encouraged by the Climate Action Plan just released, which has laid down a 30-year roadmap for the city to tackle the challenges of climate change by adopting inclusive and adopting mitigation and adaptation strategies. We fully support the action plan and commend this pioneering initiative, Mumbai, the first city in South Asia to set the target for net zero emissions by 2050, i.e. 20 years ahead of the deadline proposed by Prime Minister at Glasgow COP26. This is excellent, and we are glad that the Mumbai Action Plan aims for mitigation targets both in terms of long-term and short-term. We do, however, feel, Mr. Minister, it will be necessary to closely monitor the progress of the Climate Action Plan And may I therefore propose for your consideration the Mumbai First Environment Mission, supported by experts from the European Union and from McKinsey, monitor the progress of this plan, help monitor it, and report to you occasionally through the Empowered Committee. You will see from the program that we have some excellent national and international speakers, and following the two-day deliberations, a suitable action plan will be prepared and suggest ways of monitoring, mobilizing finance, the resilient infrastructure in metropolitan region coastal cities. I must urge the authorities that we need to take coastal vulnerability seriously, and we cannot continue with short-term solutions. Mr. Minister, with your permission, may I touch upon another subject? I read with much interest in recent press reports your observations about the need to have a single planning authority for Mumbai for long-term developments and planning for the next 50 years, taking into account the challenges faced by climatic disaster. Your views on this important subject resonates with our own concerns on the total lack of accountability in Mumbai. Mr. Minister, our journey, Mumbai First journey, with Mumbai Transformation Program began some years ago when, together with McKinsey, we prepared a report to show how Mumbai could be transformed into a world-class city. We had no illusion that our task was going to be easy. However, having been associated for several years, we now know that what the challenges and opportunities are. And indeed, there are many immense opportunities, and equally well if we can overcome the challenges. The main problem, Mr. Minister, in my view, in our view, is the lack of accountability within our present governance system. There are 17 agencies involved with the governance and execution of projects in the city. All these agencies are led by very competent, excellent managers. In other words, we have excellent players in the orchestra, but we do not have a conductor or a director. Encouraged by your vision for proper governance in Mumbai, I would like to propose a need for a CEO or an administrator. What you call him, it doesn't matter, but he should command respect, he should be knowledgeable, and with adequate powers, who should be totally accountable for the city. We have several ideas, and we would be happy to expand on this in further discussion with you, Minister. Before I conclude, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation for the excellent support and encouragement we have received and continue to receive from the officials in the government. Manisha is here. Thank you for all your support always, and others. And I would also like to place on record my appreciation and gratitude to McKinsey for their continued support. And thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Nayar, for your address. As we move forward, I now welcome on stage European Union Ambassador to India, Mr. Astuto, to kindly share a few words with this esteemed audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, Mr. Nayar. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here with you all. Actually, I was participating 2 years ago to the first edition of the same event. Then we have all gone through the pretty difficult times. We had to face an epidemic, COVID. This has upended our daily life and the way we approach, in a way, also societal problems. But one thing remains unchanged. The existential challenge posed by global warming. That's undiminished, and failure to significantly reduce emissions now will make it impossible to live up to the goals of the Paris Agreement. And I think the previous speakers have made it pretty clear, the sort of risk that we are all facing, Mumbai as the rest of the world. Now, when it comes to the European Union, as you know, we have pledged to become climate neutral by 2050. It's a process that will change our economies profoundly. But we want to change the very paradigm of growth. In the past, growth all too often has been achieved at the expense of the environment. Well, what we want to do now is to achieve growth through the protection of the environment. And our record is not too bad, because between 1990 and 2019, the European Union cut emission by 23%, while growing by 60%. So it should be possible. The transition to climate neutrality requires massive investment. We all know that. But this will lead later to savings. And the cost of inaction is much higher than the cost of action. That's something I think we all understand now. And the transition also requires quality, resilient infrastructure. And again, the previous speaker, a very interesting presentation about the sort of activities which are required now. And central, state, and local governments have a key role to play in that. Cities are responsible for 70% of global CO2 emissions for transport, building, energy, waste management. So we have to create low carbon and sustainable cities. It's particularly important as we look at the pattern of urbanization worldwide, and India is clearly no exception. India is actually likely to lead the world's urban population by 2050. And in India, as in the rest of the world, cities make a major contribution to the country's social and economic development. There is a German proverb of the Middle Ages which says, Die Stadtluft macht frei. The air of the city makes you free. That refers to the transition in Europe in the 14th century or so, where urbanization also corresponded to a dramatic shift in the social balance and progress economically. So the challenges need to be addressed while we need to nurture the opportunities. Urbanization must be green, resilient, and human-centered. Otherwise, obviously, the opposite can also be true, because as the Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman said, the air of the city can also make you lonely, in the sense that social alienation, economic marginalization, and exposure to the consequences of climate change are looming unless we are proactive and we listen to the voice of the citizens also in their aspirations. And the Global Covenant of Mayors on Climate and Energy is also part of a response to these needs. We have cities from all around the world, including 24 cities in India, that are signatories already to the Global Covenant, including Mumbai, and that was achieved actually at the last edition here around 2 years ago. So we need to foster horizontal exchanges of experiences and best practices. We shall not repeat the same mistakes. What did it get wrong in Europe, we can get it right elsewhere. So we can learn from each other. We know, again, from the previous speakers, that Mumbai specifically faces a future where rising sea levels may threaten the prosperity and well-being of its citizens. So it's particularly important we work together collectively in mitigation, obviously, achieving the Paris objectives and limiting emissions, keeping world temperature rise below 1.5%. But some of the damage is irreversible, and adaptation, therefore, is also indispensable, notably in cities and coastal areas, such as in Mumbai. So we must get our act together for the sake of the next generation. So let me close here by
There is indeed the
thanking
25th
Mumbai
year
First
plan
for
for
the
there in the
organization
next
of
few
this
years.
event and wishing all the best to the forthcoming deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Astuto, for sharing your views with all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, my next speaker has sent a recorded message. Unfortunately, since they were not able to make it here, I'm going to request the Consul to kindly show the video on screen. The message is from Consul-General, Consulate-General of Netherlands, Mr. Bart de Jong.
Good morning, everybody. Honourable Minister, Commissioner, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honoured to address you today, and I'm also proud to be one of the co-organisers of this conference. I really regret I cannot be present with you in Mumbai, especially because the topic is very close to my heart. The climate crisis is more pressing than ever. Every day we hear about new disasters, heat records being broken, wildfires, unprecedented cyclones, extreme rainfall and floods. The latest report by the UNFCCC, again, is both foreboding and disconcerting. Climate change knows no borders, and an international, therefore, is imperative. That's why I applaud Mumbai First with the initiative for this conference. The Netherlands has specific interests in the combat of climate change. 1/3 of the country is below sea level, and 2/3 is just above that, which makes our country very flood-prone. We therefore are one of the first countries experiencing the manifestations of climate change, like sea level rise and extreme rainfall. All our big cities, Amsterdam, Rotterdam and The Hague, are all below sea level, and 70% of our GDP is actually produced in areas below sea level. Now, the good news about that is that it's apparently possible to adapt to rising sea levels, provided that you take the right measures. But measures are complicated and costly. The Netherlands has actually been constructing sea and river defense systems for centuries. We've built up a wealth of experience, not only when it comes to infrastructure and technical solutions for climate adaptation, but also regarding the governance of water management and flood control, socio-economic inclusiveness of measures, as well as financing mechanisms. You will hear more about that today and tomorrow, because we have a number of Dutch speakers in the conference. We are glad to share our experiences internationally. We did so with the United States after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. We're doing so with India. We're doing so with Indonesia and numerous other countries. In fact, the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100 for integrated flood control was modeled after the Dutch Delta Plan for climate adaptation. As I said, I really regret I cannot be with you to listen to presentations and participate in discussions. But I wish you all a very fruitful conference, and I hope that we can explore ways for further cooperations. Thank you for your attention.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was a very brief glimpse into the situation at Netherlands, what is happening there currently, what are the measures being taken, and how they would like to collaborate with cities across the globe in order to contain or curb the climate change effects that are currently taking place. Moving forward, I now request Additional Municipal Commissioner of City, MCGM, Mr. Sanjeev Kumar, to kindly address the audience.
Thank you very much for the invitation. The Honourable Minister, Shri Aditya Thackeray, dignitaries on the dais, our friends from media, and ladies and gentlemen. We all know the challenge, and it's not for the next generation, it's for this generation. Just now in April, we have seen the average temperature in North and Central India, 122 years record. We know in next few decades, parts of Mumbai will go underwater if we don't do much. So what should be our response? When we were handling COVID, at the same time under the leadership of the minister, we started preparing for the Mumbai Climate Action Plan with the target of net zero by 2050. As Rajat explained in his presentation, the whole idea was that it should not be top-down. It should come from below, the bottom up. So we created a team within the corporation and collaborated with the World Resource Institute India. We are part of C40 cities, and with their help, we started the process. It began with the consultation right from the beginning, from the ward level, then the zones, and then the 20 departments within the corporation, then the departments of the state government and the national government in Mumbai city, and then of course the people. We had more 300 responses from the general public, and their ideas, their suggestions were incorporated in the plan. We know what are the risks for Mumbai: urban heating, urban flooding, coastal risks, air pollution, landslides we know. And I think one thing is that it is not going to be uniformly impacting all of us. It's going to disproportionately impacting the different segments of the society. For example, we have 287 landslide sites. Out of 287, 209 are the places where the slums, the poor people live. So it's going to impact the poor, the marginalized, people living in slums, and disproportionately the women as well. And historically we have seen whenever there is stress on community, the stress is transmitted more to the women compared to the men. Urban heating, we all know that over the last 50 years or 47 years, we have been seeing Mumbai heating up, 0.25 degrees Celsius temperature increasing every decade. And then within the city, the informal settlements, the densely populated slums, we already see the average temperature of 6 to 8 degrees more as compared to the other parts of the city. We have identified 6 sectors where we need to intervene. For example, we did this greenhouse gas inventory we know there's 23.4 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent every year. And if we don't do anything over the next 30 years, by 2050, it would go to more than 64 million tons, almost 3 times increase. And if with the existing way we are doing, it would probably come to 51 million metric tons. But with an aggressive strategy, it can come to 4 or 4.5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. So we can achieve. So the 6 sectors we have the energy, then the 24 sub-components, I think the detailing, let's leave it is, but the main is the energy, because we know 72% of our greenhouse gas emission comes from the energy, residential and commercial, 20% comes from the transport sector, 8% comes from the waste management sector. So these are our main challenges. Then of course the urban greening, urban flooding we are focusing on, air pollution we are focusing on, and in these different 6 sectors, how can we intervene, how can we bring changes, that's our main focus. We all know, but what we think are the challenges for corporation. One of course is the expertise. So that's why we are in the process of creating the climate action cell within the corporation by having experts from the outside. So I think that is, historically we have not handled this kind of challenge within the corporation, within the city. So that is the challenge for us. The second challenge which I believe is that within the corporation and outside the corporation, it impacts almost every department. Water supply, sanitation, the roads. You take any department, it deals directly or indirectly with the climate change. So how can we high profile the climate action within each department? That is a challenge for us. So that's what we are planning to do. So when we are going to build the expertise, it's not going to be at the corporation level, right from the board level, zone level, and the corporation also. And the third, of course, is that I think not only in India, but throughout the world, no government has enough resources. We are always short of resources. We are always have the competing priorities. So we would need the expertise to tell us, out of 100 things, which are the 10 things you should do first, where the cost benefit or the maximum buck you will get with your investment. So we are in the process, and under the leadership of Honourable Minister, I must say, we will succeed. We have succeeded in Maharashtra in many other initiatives over the last 200 years. We will definitely succeed. We will be leader in not only in India, in South Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for the keynote. I request Vice President, Private Sector and PPP, Asian Development Bank, Mr. Ashok Lavasa, to kindly join me at the dais.
Mr. Minister, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I think I should call everyone here climate warrior. I'm grateful for the invitation to speak at this conference. Let me begin by recalling COP21, the Paris climate change negotiations, when I was leading the Indian official delegation. So on day one of the negotiations, as the day ended, we received news of massive flooding in Chennai and neighboring districts. And while a lot of people attribute it to the El Nino effect, I think equally there are people who believe that the damage caused to lives and livestock and infrastructure was a man-made disaster. So when I was going to the second day of the negotiations, I thought that that catastrophe is a message which nature was giving to COP21. And I think this message was similar to something that I read yesterday while I was coming to Mumbai. And that said that we are the first generation to feel the sting of climate change. And we are the last generation that can do something about it. I would like to believe that this conference is a step in the direction of doing something about it. The theme of this conference is timely. We all know the urgency of tackling climate change, and the recently released IPCC report has underscored this urgency, stating that if global warming is not limited, the world will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. In a report released yesterday, the United Nations has warned that the frequency and duration of droughts will continue to increase due to human-caused climate change, with water scarcity already affecting 2.3 billion people across the world, with that number expected to double by 2050. Although no region is spared from drought, the report particularly highlights the vulnerability of Africa, the Americas, India, and Australia as areas of current and future concerns. India saw, according to that report, a drought-related shrink of 5% to its GDP between 1998 and 2017, and Australia's agriculture productivity slumped 18% between 2002 and 2010 due to droughts. Coastal cities and settlements are on the climate change front line. They are our first line of defense, facing some of the highest climate risks. Nearly 11% of the global population, about 896 million people, live on low elevation coasts directly exposed to climate and non-climate coastal hazards. These cities and settlements are growing rapidly as people move to the coast. Resilient and sustainable coastal livelihoods depend on maintaining diverse, productive, and healthy coastal ecosystems in the face of global climate change. Coastal settlements also play a key role in advancing climate-related development because they are critical for national economies and global maritime trade. damage to ports could severely compromise global supply chain and maritime trade, with potentially major geopolitical and economic ramifications. Even if we collectively manage to keep global temperatures from rising to 2 degrees Celsius, by 2050, at least 570 cities and some 800 million people will be exposed to rising seas and storm surges. And it is not just people and real estate that are at risk, but roads, railways, ports, underwater internet cables, farmlands, sanitation and drinking water pipelines and reservoirs, and even mass transit systems. While some coastal cities and nations will literally disappear, the rest will need to adapt, and quickly. Coastal flooding events could threaten assets worth up to 20% of global GDP by 2100. Sea level rise constitutes a chronic adaptation challenge. It requires dealing with slow onset changes in parallel with increasing frequency and magnitude of extreme events that will escalate in coming decades. At centennial timescales, projected sea level rise constitutes an existential threat for many island nations, low-lying coastal zones, and their communities, infrastructure, and cultural heritage. But coastal cities are also where transformative climate-resilient development can happen. The IPCC report identifies 5 core conditions for coastal cities and settlements to fulfill their role in climate-resilient development. Number 1, take a long-term perspective when making short-term decisions by keeping options open to adjust as sea level rises and avoiding new development in high-risk locations. Number 2, enable more effective coordination by establishing networks across different governance levels and policy domains to build trust and legitimize decisions. 3, reduce social and climate injustice by taking historical conditions, including past emissions and prevailing political realities, into account and proactively reducing vulnerability and inequity. 4, strengthen local democracy by facilitating participation, involving stakeholders early and consistently through to implementation, with particular attention to engaging indigenous people and marginalized and vulnerable groups. And 5, develop governance capabilities to tackle complex problems by drawing on multiple knowledge systems, including local and scientific knowledge, to co-design more acceptable and effective responses. At the Asian Development Bank, we focus on providing assistance in all 5 core areas. One of our key operational priorities in tackling climate change, building climate and disaster resilience, and enhancing environmental sustainability. In October 21, ADB raised its target of climate financing for developing member countries from $80 billion to $100 billion during 2019-2030. The additional $20 billion will provide support for the climate agenda in 5 main areas, one of which includes scale-up of transformative adaptation projects. Projects in climate-sensitive sectors such as urban, agriculture, and water will be designed with the primary purpose of effective climate adaptation and enhanced resilience. Specific to coastal areas and settlements, we have several projects, programs, funds, and facilities, including the Urban Financing Partnership Facility, which help our developing member countries at building the resilience of their coastal cities. One recent project is the Coastal and Sustainable Fisheries Project announced this month, where ADB will disburse $100 million loans and grants to implement projects for economic development in provinces in Cambodia. Another project focusing on coastal development is the Bangladesh Coastal Town Climate Resilience Project, in which ADB is working with the government of Bangladesh to develop climate-resilient infrastructure in 8 vulnerable coastal secondary towns. While helping our developing member countries in building coastal resilience, ADB follows a nature-based approach, something which was highlighted in the presentation in the morning. Nature-based solutions are based on the notion that when ecosystems are healthy and well managed, they provide essential benefits and services to people, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions, securing safe water resources, making air safer to breathe, or providing increased food security. ADB believes a nature-positive approach can transform energy, infrastructure, and transport in urban areas in ways that build greater resilience, enrich biodiversity, store carbon, and meet development needs. Nature-positive approaches challenge conventional urban governance, spatial planning, traditional engineering, and even capital markets by offering broad opportunities for greater resilience. Just as urban development is multi-sectoral, nature-based development can contribute to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals, particularly 11 and 13. ADB works with coastal cities in enhancing their coastal resilience through nature-based and integrated solutions. This includes supporting the preparation of integrated plans, identifying the necessary policies and investments to enhance coastal resilience, identifying livelihood opportunities for the vulnerable sections, particularly women, preparing projects and investments, and improving the understanding of coastal resilience solutions know-how and the role and value of coastal ecosystems, and promoting regional cooperation on coastal and marine ecosystems as regional public goods. One example of this integrated planning is ADB providing support to the government of Vanuatu to prepare a coastal resilience roadmap for Fatumaru Bay. In the Republic of Marshall Islands, ADB is supporting the preparation of conservation and resource management plans. In Indonesia, ADB is supporting the revision of Indonesia's National Flood Works Guidelines. In the Pacific Islands, developing member countries are particularly vulnerable to climate change, with 90% of the Pacific Islands living within 5 kilometers of the coast. Recognizing these challenges, ADB has designed a development approach that recognizes and incorporates the challenges of these countries. This development approach is contained in a paper released by ADB last year. It's called the Fragile and Conflict-Affected Situations and Small Island Developing States Approach. This approach is based on the concept of specific tailored approaches built on flexibility and driven by innovation. The coastal areas of India are densely populated, and around 30% of its human population is dependent on coastal and marine resources. Over 250 million people live within a distance of 50 kilometers from the coast, and a large population of them are in metropolitan cities like Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata. The coastal and marine biodiversity is a strategic asset, providing a wide range of goods and services in India. ADB has spearheaded several projects to tackle climate change in coastal regions in India. In 2021, ADB provided a $251 million loan for urban flood protection and management in the Chennai-Kosathallayar River Basin. Chennai's rapid urbanization had encroached on the city's natural landscape, reducing water bodies and water retention capacity. The project will establish climate-resilient urban flood protection infrastructure and provide infrastructure for water recharge. Flood preparedness is being strengthened by developing guidelines to integrate flood hazard zoning into spatial and land use planning. Implementing a flood citizen observatory for real-time information in flood areas and creating a manual for green infrastructure design, including rainwater harvesting. In addition, the project aims to enhance stakeholders' involvement in flood preparedness. Technical staff of the Chennai Municipal Corporation is also being given training in planning and design of infrastructure. Coastal areas of the country, though unparalleled repositories of biodiversity and source of livelihoods for millions of people that live in these areas, are also faced with a number of challenges, including wastewater discharge from coastal aquaculture, solid waste from land-based resources, microplastics in the oceans, unplanned coastal tourism, harmful fishing practices, multiple uses of coastal spaces leading to soil accretion and erosion, and climate change being an additional stressor. ADB is helping protect India's coastline affected by erosion through the Sustainable Coastal Protection and Management Investment Program. The project will reduce coastal erosion and instability in the western coastal states of Goa, Karnataka, and Maharashtra. It focuses on solutions that protect the coastal environment as well as support private sector and community involvement in protection and management activities. The program aims to address immediate coastal protection needs and coastal instability using environmentally and socially appropriate solutions with a focus on softer options such as artificial reefs, beach nourishments, and dune management. The program also aims to protect the coastline from erosion and in so doing enhances income-generating opportunities for coastal community. India is one of the mega diverse countries of the world, and we must do everything possible to protect this wealth of nature. As mentioned in the previous examples, ADB is implementing a multi-pronged strategy to assist the developing member countries. I repeat that it is crucial to take the long-term perspective when designing climate-resilient infrastructure. It is also important to strengthen local democracy by facilitating discussion and coordination among stakeholder groups. And this conference is a valuable arena to spearhead this discussion. Sustainability is no longer about doing less harm. It is about doing more good. I look forward to the deliberations at this conference, adding to the momentum of doing good for a sustainable future. I thank you for your patience, and I leave you with what Edmund Burke, the Irish philosopher, said, and I quote, "Nobody made a greater mistake than he who did nothing because he could do only a little." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lavasa. Thank you for sharing with us ways in which ADB is proactively and very, very actively supporting the cause of environmental protection. As we move forward, ladies and gentlemen, I now request Metropolitan Commissioner MMRDA, Mr. S.V.R. Srinivas, to join me at the dais and address the audience.
Good morning and a warm welcome to this international conference, Crisis 2.0. And Honourable Minister, Shri Aditya Thackeray sir, dignitaries on the dais and esteemed guests. I would limit myself to what MMRDA is doing, its bit as far as the climate crisis is concerned. We have actually an MMR, Environment Improvement Society, which actually spearheads a lot of things. One such was in fact, the Mumbai Mahim Nature Park Society. If you see, it is one of the first experiments where a dumping ground has been converted into a garden, and the great Salim Ali had actually planted the first plant. Having said that, now we will come to the conference. One of the very important points is regarding the MCAP, Mumbai Climate Action Plan, which has actually put the target net zero by 2050, and taking into consideration the urban heat island effects. I would like to come to the 6 focus areas of Mumbai Climate Action Plan, which has been launched by Shri Aditya Thackeray sir during the MCGM conference, and I happened to be present in that conference. First thing it struck me is that actually MMRDA is already doing about 5 of the 6 areas in its own limited way, attending in implementing the projects. First area that was actually focused upon by MCAP is the sustainable mobility, right? Which basically means the public transport to be given focus rather than private transport. In fact, most of the pollution happens through private transport. So we are actually implementing the Mumbai Metro Rail in a big time. About 300 kilometers of Mumbai Metro Rail is planned. And in fact, in the last 1 month, we had opened 20 kilometers of metro line and inaugurated by Honourable Chief Minister Shri Uddhavji Thackeray sir in this city alone. And in fact, that is the first north-south new line that has happened after a century, I think. That's one. So shifting from a modal shift, affecting a modal shift from private transport and intermediate public transport, IPT, to public transport through metro and other categories is a very important step in that direction, and that addresses the first point of MCAP. Second is urban greens. In fact, MMR regional plan has also been launched in the month of August by Honourable Chief Minister, where actually U1, U2 areas, urbanizable zones U1, U2, have been done away with, but a larger green map has been prepared. So in this context, I would like to actually say that, climate and environment do not respect administrative boundaries, right? So we have only drawn for administrative convenience. So I am actually proposing that I request Honourable Minister to declare in his speech that whether we should go ahead with a climate environment action plan for the MMR region. So that is one thing I would like to put forth for the consideration. And third is, of course, the biggest thing that MCGM does in a big time is the waste management. That is the third focus area of this MCAP. So there actually we are tying up for outside Mumbai. MMRDA is actively going to implement a MMR region's waste management plan for 3 cities, including Ulhasnagar, etc. Because these corporations are too small and they don't have the resources, right? So that we are trying to do. And fourth point is air quality. Of course, by affecting a modal shift from private transport to public transport, air quality is definitely will improve. So that is one of the very core areas, mobility and improving the air quality thereby. It is the fourth area that we are going to implement. And of course, the water resource management is the fifth area. Water resource management, we are doing a project for Mira Bhainder Commissioner is sitting here, along with Vasai Virar. Vasai Virar is the fastest growing urban agglomeration in India for the last 1 decade. So we are going to give a regional water supply scheme, and we are trying to give the water to Vasai Virar by, in fact, November this year alone. So these are the things that we are going to do. Out of 6 areas, 5 areas we are already adapting. But now I would like to limit myself to part 2. That is about the actual core theme of the conference, about financing. How to finance it, right? That is the most important thing that should be addressed. There are 2 parts I would like to emphasize before I depart. One is funding these areas, right? We require funding. So for MMRDA side, we have prepared a funding plan for enhancing mobilizing resources for the various projects that I have just outlined. And Honourable Chief Minister is well aware of this, and he is pursuing it actively, and he will be deciding very soon and proactively declaring it through cabinet decision. However, but the more important, more intelligent way of tackling it is do in such a way that externalities are taken, are internalized, because ultimately environment is something which is not divisible. So since the externalities, if they are not internalized, we will be left with what UK has experienced. Environment will become the tragedy of commons. We are all aware of what happened in 19th century and 18th century. That should not happen. So the funding patterns actually should be such that we are able to internalize the externalities and come out with action plans and projects in such a way that automatically environmental concerns are taken care of. In this context, Mr. Ashok Lavasa is here, so we are happy to, I'm just happy to inform you that we are already tied up with the NDB and NDB for some of our small metro projects, but in other areas as well. And I would like to thank, in this context, Mr. Narinder Nayar, who has been associated with me for more than a decade, and Mumbai First for organizing conference, and wish the conference all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivas, for shedding light on the various areas of focus and undertakings of MMRDA with regards to MCAP. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward, I now request Principal Secretary Environment, Government of Maharashtra, Ms. Manisha Mhaiskar, to please join me at the dais.
Oh yeah, sure, of course. A very good morning, respected Minister, sir, respected Ambassador, dignitaries on the dais and this august audience. Under the inspiring leadership of our Minister, the department for the last 2 years is working on the three core principles which have been mentioned earlier. One, that climate change is real. It is no longer a matter of debate as to whether climate change happens. Secondly, that climate change is here. All of us are experiencing the harmful effects of climate change. There is nobody left who has not experienced climate change. And the third is time to act is now. In fact, our minister is fond of saying that ideally the time to act was the last decade, but if not last decade, the time to act is now. All of those who understand bureaucracies would have understood the typical dilemma that our department faces, our department being the Department of Environment faces. Typically in the structure of government, it is the Department of Environment and Climate Change which is given the task of ensuring global warming doesn't happen or of ensuring climate action. But all the climate action that has to be done is to be done by partner departments, by brother departments, be it energy department, agriculture, urban development. And therefore, typically in bureaucracies, if climate action was only a departmental agenda, the other departments might not have felt so much encouraged and so much committed to it. And therefore, Maharashtra, what Maharashtra has done, and it is again an idea or a master stroke of our Honourable Minister, is that Maharashtra has created the Maharashtra Council of Climate Change, or the MCCC. And I think that is where half the battle is won in Maharashtra, because climate action agenda in Maharashtra is now no longer the agenda of a humble environment department, but it is the agenda of the state of Maharashtra, because this MCCC has the Chief Minister as its chair, and it has the Deputy Chief Minister and the Finance Minister at its Vice Chair. So all the departments, be it the Department of Energy, Industry, Urban Development or Agriculture, when they present their climate action agendas, they are actually presenting it to the state of Maharashtra, to the Chief Minister and to the Cabinet, and that is where I believe half of the battle is won. Under this MCCC, what we have done, and which is very relevant to the conference, is that we have created 6 verticals of climate action. The first and the foremost vertical of climate action is the vertical of power. We need to decarbonize power. That's the first. The second vertical is the vertical of transport, and here we are looking at 4 sub-verticals. That transport has to be electric, it has to be public, it has to be shared, and it has to be non-motorized. Third vertical is using clean technology in industry. Fourth vertical is sustainable practices, and I'm very mindful that there is a timer. So the fourth vertical is the vertical of sustainable practices of agriculture and animal development, animal husbandry. Fifth vertical is the vertical of livable cities. And the sixth vertical is the vertical of build, something that we realized when the minister and a team attended the COP26 at Glasgow, which is that all the raw material which goes into building today has a tremendous carbon footprint, and we have to move from this highly carbonized raw material to a greener footprint of raw material. So that is the sixth. The entire climate action journey is a journey of transition. And again, our minister is very fond of saying that this transition has to be just. This transition has to ensure that the most vulnerable of person and the most vulnerable of areas also get justice. For which, of course, climate finance is the key. And therefore, I would like to thank Mumbai First, with whom I have been personally associated for the last 15 years. I would like to thank Climate First, Mr. Narinder Nayar, for organizing this conclave on climate finance. Our minister also has the concept of organizing conclaves on each of the 6 verticals. We just had a very successful conclave on alternative fuels in Mumbai. Our next conclave is going to be the conclave on green finance. And therefore, for climate action to happen, for transition to happen, and for just transition to happen, climate finance is the key. I am sure we will have fruitful discussion over the next 2 days as to how to access finance. I am going to request all the dignitaries on the dais on behalf of the minister and the department to also join our conclave on climate finance, where we will be introducing the concept of climate finance to all our key departments in Maharashtra who are involved in climate action, and also the private sector players in Maharashtra. At the very end, I would like to say that the department is currently also implementing its flagship program called Maji Vasundhara, which is one of the partners there on the board. And lastly, I would also like to say that because of the sterling leadership which is being given by our minister, Shri Aditya ji Thackeray, firstly, that Maharashtra was the only sub-national state to be present at COP26 in Glasgow. All the countries were represented by their prime ministers, of course, and their environment ministers. But Maharashtra was a sub-national which was very prominently present. And the minister was awarded the award of the most inspiring leadership by the Under 2 coalition. We are committed to climate action, and we would like all of you to be partnering with the state of Maharashtra for our climate action agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mhaiskar. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time now for me to welcome to our dais our guest of honor, our very young and dynamic Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Tourism and Protocol Government of Maharashtra. Sir is an environment warrior himself, in truest sense of the term. I'm sure everybody sitting here is aware, and like Ms. Mhaiskar just said, he's also been given a leadership award. So we can't wait to hear from you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, everybody. Very good morning to everyone. Good afternoon, rather. I think all the experts have spoken. We're about to, I mean, if it's safe, I'll take off my mask if everyone's okay with that. We're all about to obviously have deliberations in terms of what climate finance is, what the roadmap ahead is, what our climate action plans are. And I'm no expert here. I'm not a sectoral expert. I'm not someone who's, deep diving into any of the issues that we're discussing today. I'm just another 31-year-old person who's wanting to build a better planet for all of us. When we look at climate action goals, most of our goals are around 2050, 2070, 2100, 2200. For someone like me who's probably 31 years right now, and a lot of us in this whole age group, we're wondering, yes, we're thinking about the future, but what about today? About 20 years ago, when we spoke of climate action, when we spoke about adaptation, when we spoke about resilience mitigation, we had a famous saying that this is what we are giving to the next generation. We believed very genuinely that this is what we are, what we owe to the future, what we owe for the children, what we owe to the people who are not yet here on our planet and about to come in the next few, generations to come. But now I think it's about time that we start thinking about ourselves. We start thinking about our own generation. We start thinking very, very selfishly about how we are going to spend our next 10, 20, 15, 30, 40 years on this planet. It's increasingly becoming difficult for all of us to go on with life as usual. If you just take out extracts from newspapers of the last 5 years, or probably the last 10 years, and being in politics for about 10 years now, since the year 2011, 2012, I've started off my journey with going into drought-hit areas of Maharashtra, giving water there in terms of the wells, trying to look at evaporation rates, trying to see whether we could cover wells, we could look at, basalt rock having smaller dams being created, barrage dams being created. We could look at different solutions. And I know a lot of us out here with Mumbai First and many more partner agencies always do this when we are facing crises like droughts or floods or other things that we really face in terms of nature. But exceedingly, as we come towards 2015, 2016, what I started noticing is the same areas that we went for drought relief work started facing flash floods. And there is a huge shift there. Today, as we stand in 2022, from the year 2019, 2018 onwards, the extremities are such that these are no longer anomalies in climate change, or these are not erratic weather events. There's a pattern to it. Every newspaper report in summer reports saying this is probably the hottest April in the last 100 years, probably the hottest May in the last 120 years. You go towards June and July and they'll say it is the wettest monsoon in the last 50 years. You go towards winters and it's probably the first time this February that we had to wear sweaters in Mumbai. So we're seeing extremes in our seasons, we're seeing extremes in every type of weather pattern that we are seeing, and if we don't accept this as climate crisis, if we don't accept this as a climate emergency, we're definitely keeping our eyes closed and moving in the future without learning anything from today or the past. I often say this, and I've been seeing this, feeling this in the last few days, not just as a minister, but as someone who's a 31-year-old citizen in this country, as someone who's a part of a political party, as someone who's a part of government, that our country really is living in two extremes. On one extreme, we're trying to find water on the moon and on Mars. And this is not just our country, this is across the world. And on the other extreme, we are trying to find Mars and other planets in our own horoscopes. We're not finding a midway ahead. We're not finding to see whether we have enough water for our own housing societies in a city like Mumbai. We're not trying to find what is the solution for a drought or a water shortage in a hamlet which is not even 2.5 hours away from Mumbai. We're not trying to find a solution for burning garbage dumps near Delhi. And if we don't do that, I don't know what else are we looking for. Because without a sustainable future, without a sustainable roadmap, without thinking about today, I do not know what we are fighting for. In the last few days, I've been seeing newspapers where all political parties, all of us, we're fighting over the past. We're constantly fighting over what happened in history was right or wrong. We're constantly fighting over, who did what and whether they were right or wrong. We're not fighting for our today. We're not fighting for our tomorrow. I think it is time that we start thinking about our today and our tomorrow. The single biggest event in our world history that is affecting us today, apart from COVID, of course, and COVID has been a terrible scar on humanity, a terrible memory for the last 2 years, apart from the fact that we all came together and started supporting each other beyond boundaries, I think that is a good memory we can hold and a great learning we can have when we go towards the future. But today, the biggest problem or the biggest challenge we have is climate change. And the biggest hope we have is climate action. I think drawing hope from the spirit of humanity, drawing hope from the ambitions that we have, if you look at some of our service industry, if you look at some of our manufacturing industry, if you look at some of our numbers of the economy, if you look at some of our hotel industry that's doing really well, people are wanting to step out after COVID, people are wanting to support each other, people are wanting to go forward, break the barriers of COVID, break the chains of lockdowns, and move forward. I think that is really what gives me hope. And if we stand by hope, I believe that climate action is not meant for 2040. I believe that climate action is not meant for 2070 or 2100. It's meant for today. And if we don't start today, we're not going ahead anywhere in the future. With that thought, we started off on a journey for climate action plans. Speaking about Maharashtra, we have about 120 million people living in our state. When we were at COP26, which is almost 7 months ago, and seems like a decade ago now, when we won the Regional Inspirational Award, I think that was back then. And now we're looking at the next COP, because it's not enough to be doing something for the past, now we're looking for the future. And I've been chasing our department, and thankfully we have a very, very competitive principal secretary, which even, Atul was telling me that, she's been having a great stint as an environment secretary. We've also got Sanjeev Kumar ji here, we've got Srinivas ji here. All of us are working as one team. We're working to build something which is better for our own selves, very selfishly, because if we don't start from today, we don't look at the low-hanging fruits, we're never going to go to the top of the tree. Looking at what we want to build for our state of Maharashtra, it's a very complex state, it's a very beautiful state. We've got a huge coastline, long coastline, but apart from that, coastal cities, cities on hilltops, cities in arid areas, cities in areas where you have great potential for solar energy, great potential for wind energy, great potential for rainfall catchment areas. But when we build and weave all of this together, we have certain figures that are quite astounding, that are quite challenging, and that also is a sort of hope for all of us. Like I said, we've got 120 million people in our state, out of which almost 60% or 50%, more than 60 million people live in 43 cities that are million plus. Cities like Mumbai, Pune, Thane, Navi Mumbai, Nagpur, Sambhajinagar, Nasik, Kolhapur, these are cities that are constantly growing, not just on the cusp of development, but on the cusp of something which is higher, better. And I think the plan that is, in terms of the development plans that we have for 2034, 2050, have to have some climate agendas weaved into it. We are the economic backbone of the country. We have Mumbai, the financial capital of the country, out here. We also have highly, highly urbanized areas. We have smaller towns wanting to be a part of these highly urbanized areas, but we also have a huge sector that is dependent on agriculture every single day. Now, when we look at a state like this, we've decided to have climate action plans for all 43 cities. Our race to zero has to be faster than everyone else. Our vulnerability, really, not just talking about a coastal city like Mumbai or Ratnagiri or Sindhudurg, our vulnerability for every city and every district, every taluka in Maharashtra is really high. Because when we speak about continents, when we speak about North America or South America, when we speak of Europe, when we look at Australia, when we speak about the entire Oceania, I think the vulnerability for India is probably the highest. And I say this purely by a couple of things put together. A geographical location. We face monsoons almost all across, every part of India at least faces monsoons once in 12 months. We face a heat wave once in 12 months. We have winters once in 12 months. So each part of India really has its own seasons that move from one part to the other. And then we have the retreating monsoon. So we face the dangers of a flash flood, landslide, heat wave, cold wave, all throughout the year. And if we have to look at ourselves as one unit as a country, our disaster management rooms in the last 5 to 7 years have been working 24/7 for at least one part of our country, if not another. Now, when we speak about our own country, Maharashtra, and a couple of more states which we have been interacting with very, very actively, be it Tamil Nadu, be it many more states across India, we believe, and the proposal we've already sent to the Union Minister for Forest and Environment, we believe that climate action is something for us to do at a national level and a regional level. And we've proposed something called the Council of Climate Change, the National Council of Climate Change. We've got a GST council where the finance minister of the country has deliberations with finance ministers across different states of India, and then comes out with different rules and regulations and GST notifications for a country. But today, if you go and see what is really important for our country, and there's a famous saying in a country that monsoons are the real finance minister of the country. I think if you go by that saying, we need a National Council of Climate Change. Because today I've come to believe, and when we created and instituted the Maharashtra Council of Climate Change, I've come to believe that climate action is no longer just the work of the Environment Ministry. It's no longer just the work of just the Forest Ministry. It is the work of the Urban Development Ministry. It is the work of the Rural Development Ministry, the Energy Portfolio, the Transport Portfolio, the Industry Portfolio. All of these actually make what climate action is today. And when we look at sectoral action in terms of climate change, we need to weave all of them together in one place, on one table. And that is, I think, where our real climate action will move ahead. I'm extremely proud that as State of Maharashtra, we have been focusing on sustainable development. We have a Chief Minister, Mr. Thackeray, who is a wildlife enthusiast, a wildlife photographer, a conservationist. I come from a family of conservationists. But going beyond that, I think in the past 2 years, while we've battled COVID, and we've given a brave fight as citizens of Maharashtra, our state of Maharashtra has added almost 15,500 hectares to mangroves under the Indian Forest Act, newly in the past 2 years. We've got 2 Ramsar sites. We've added 2 sanctuaries. We've got 10 conservation reserves. We're adding 24 new conservation reserves in the next week, hopefully. But while we do all of this, on the urban side, we've gone ahead with the coastal road. We've moved ahead with the Trans-Harbour Link. We're moving ahead with the GMLR. We're looking at the Mumbai-Nagpur highway. We're looking at desalination of Mumbai. And when we do all of this, we're looking at a climate test put to all of these projects. I'll give you a small example. Now, Mumbai is facing a shortfall of 400 million litres of water per day. We were proposing for the last whatever years to build the Gargai-Pinjal Dam. But that Gargai Dam would be in the middle of the Tansa Wildlife Sanctuary. Obviously, it's got a lot of endemic species out there. You've got a good number of highly endangered species out there. We would have had to cut almost 500,000 trees. The solution to that was to scrap that project. And we've done that. But the alternative to create a water source is we are working closely with Israel to build desal, and that will be ready by 2025, to bring an equal amount of water in what would be costing for the dam about 36,000 crores, almost 1,600 crores for this desal plant, but saving on trees, saving on our biodiversity, saving on money, time, efficiency, and moving towards something which is an alternative source for sustainable development. And these are the solutions that we're trying to build when we look at governance. Today, environmental action is no longer for just the partner agencies, no longer for wildlife enthusiasts, not for NGOs for sure, it's for all of us to work together for a better planet. And when we move at looking at, when we look towards building a better planet, I hope that Maharashtra is not going to be alone running the race. We can be first movers, we would want to be first movers definitely. We would be wanting to lead the pack, but I hope that all the states across India are running shoulder to shoulder, because we have boundaries for administration, we have boundaries for our regions, languages, people, cultures. Biodiversity has no boundaries as such, it merges from one to another. I think that is where climate action really holds true for a national convention on climate action. Going further, Atulji, I think our work together with UNEP is something I really hold close to my heart, because you and I met, I think, 2 or 3 years before I took over as the Minister for Environment. And from then on, we've been in touch, be it beach cleanups and mangrove cleanups to, speaking about electric mobility. Your idea, which was fascinating back then, when you showed me your electric vehicle, we've mandated that for us as a government, for every urban local body and every, ministerial department, we've said that every new vehicle that we rent or buy has to be electric. And that's what we've started off. So that was an inspiration back then when I met you. I can openly say that today. But we've definitely set targets. We're looking at sustainable tourism. We're looking at green hotels that have been given industry status. We're looking at a green future with our real estate industry. We're looking at working closely with our forest department. We're looking at urban development, having a climate action test for almost every proposal that is passed. I look forward for a better future, because conferences like this like these with Mumbai First. And I met Mr. Nayar a couple of months ago. And again, what he mentioned about Mumbai, and I'm going to come over to that topic in the next 2 minutes after I conclude my remarks for the environment action, because I'm looking forward to understand more about how we can tap into climate finance. Climate finance is a very, very important topic for all of us. Like everyone has said here in the presentation and in the keynote, it is probably going to be more affordable for us to work on building resilience and adaptation right now than to look at disasters and compensating for those disasters years later. At COP26, when we landed into COP26 and the meetings out there, we were hearing of big numbers, $400 billion and so many $billion in euros and pounds. I think what is important for us is to look at two things, or rather three things. One is what is the cost we're going to pay in terms of carrying on in business as usual. That is one. Two, how can we as regional governments, how can we as urban local bodies, and how can we as national governments create projects for sustainable development, for the Paris Agreement, for COP26, and tap into this global finance or the kitty that is available for green financing. And three, we as a country need to look at the opportunity that we are going to have for creating green growth, green economy and jobs when we look at climate finance and a whole new industry with the environment climate action. I think that is something we're looking at. In terms of moving further, one of the important remarks that Mr. Nayar made here when I was discussing this idea, and the Chief Minister himself is also very keen for the city of Mumbai, where we have multiple agencies, planning agencies, and almost 42 utilities when we dig up a road to remake a road. We're looking at and actively working towards having one single agency to run the city. I think that is very, very crucial. An empowered mayor more than a CEO, because a mayor would be a more democratic elected forum where you have many more voices that represent Mumbai coming together. So that is something we're working on. I see Praja Foundation also here. We've been discussing with them and Mumbai First. This is something which is very crucial for us. Having the experience of worked in the BMC for almost 25 years, we see that multiple agencies, and thankfully now when we work together, and Sanjeev ji and Srinivas are both who have been AMCs in the BMC, will tell you that while even making a single footpath, a pedestrian pathway in Mumbai, you need to work with 16 agencies, planning authorities, permission authorities, and 42 utilities. We're looking at a single agency very soon. That good news we can deliver very, very soon to you. But I think this is just the beginning of a beautiful partnership. Our partner agencies, people who are interested in climate action, thank you for coming here today. This is the beginning of a very long road, an uphill climb, but I guess with all of us powering that climb towards a better future, it's going to be a little more easier than what we think. Let's not be disillusioned by saying it's going to be easy, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a habit change for all of us, but we need to make it if we've got to survive on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable insights and your thoughts. I think sir has driven home a very, very important but a very simple message that now it's no longer up to the environmental agencies or the governments to save the planet, to save the environment. It is now up to each and every one of us to do our bit. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, for the vote of thanks, I request Mr. Roger C. Pereira, Vice Chairman, Mumbai First, to kindly join me at the dais.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Ambassador, the dignitaries on the stage. But before I start, our Chairman, Mr. Narinder Nayar, would like to convey our gratitude to all the people on the stage. Shall we? Yeah. Our Honourable Minister is not only a committed environmentalist, he's also a fantastic extempore speaker. On behalf of Mumbai First, I express my sincere gratitude to the Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Tourism and Protocol, Shri Aditya Thackeray, for his kind presence and very inspiring inaugural address. You know, in a career, and I might depart from my prepared text, in a career expanding 60 years plus, one has the opportunity of working with several chief ministers, not only of Maharashtra, but also of other states, with several prime ministers, not only in India, but also in Singapore and other countries. Mr. Rajat Gupta mentioned in his theme inaugural about how Singapore started this 25 years ago and still have a long way to go. Not since the late and venerable Lee Kuan Yew have I seen a minister so committed to the environment, not just only to his constituency, but the entire city of Mumbai and the entire state of Maharashtra. He is really a role model for people in public office, not only in our city, not only in our state, not only in our country, but I think all over the world. Thank you so much, and hope there are more and more ministers in public office like you, sir. We, as Mumbaikars, are fortunate that an issue as grave as climate change is brought with all determination and resources under the able leadership of Mr. Thackeray. His presence at the conference is testimony to the fact that climate action in Mumbai is imperative. Under the leadership of Mr. Thackeray, Mumbai has already set up a roadmap with a new climate action plan, which clearly states its risk and its vulnerabilities and actions to be undertaken to make Mumbai safe and secure in precise and clear terms. And that is what this conference is all about. We at Mumbai First would also like to express our utmost gratitude to the government dignitaries for their distinguished presence here today. I would also like to thank Mrs. Manisha Mhaiskar, Mr. SVR Srinivas, and all the other commissioners, including Mr. Sanjeev Kumar, for investing their valuable time addressing this conference. The government of Maharashtra, the BMC, MMR have been our constant support at achieving our endeavors. On behalf of Mumbai First, I would also like to thank our long and trusted friends from the European Union, especially His Excellency, the Ambassador, for his constant support under the EU Mumbai First leadership partnership and collaborating with us in making this conference happen. I would also like to make a special mention of the Consul-General of Netherlands for his virtual address and his office for their guidance in curating this conference. My address would not be complete without mentioning our supporters and sponsors, Tata Sons, who came in very generously to help this conference happen. GSW, the JSW Foundation, Concast India, Maharashtra Pollution Control Board, Blue Dart, Godrej, Kotak Asset Management Company, All Cargo Logistics, Hindustan Lever, Mahindra Holidays, HSBC, MMR Environment Improvement Society of MMRDA, ICCSA. Lastly, I cannot but thank our chairman, who is virtually synonymous with Mumbai First, Mr. Narinder Nayar. Let's give him a warm round of applause. He has tirelessly worked for the city and for climate action. It's been a phenomenal guide and constant supporter of this cause. Thank you so much. And finally, lastly, and but not the least, thank you, each one of you, for attending this conference. Mr. Lavasa, thank you very much for your kind presence and your warm address. And Mr. Atul Bagai, thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Pereira, for giving us the vote of thanks. I thank our Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Shri Aditya Thackeray ji, for taking time off his busy schedule and joining us here today. A special thanks to Mr. Rajat Gupta, Senior Partner, McKinsey India, for giving us that comprehensive presentation.